So we can, okay. So the is recorded. No?
Yeah.
It's getting recorded.
Yeah.
So it will encompass the whole of organizational structure, right? From the nature of organizations and also different form of management. You see this behavioral form of management. And here there is Taylorism. So a certain aspect will definitely come because things are interlinked, and also different principles related to, as I have already told you, the democratic functioning principle, interactive principles, then citizens' participations, okay, and external support. So at what stage external support usually facilitated in an organization? So it combines everything, okay. So that we will discuss tomorrow if you want me to discuss. Otherwise, you have sufficient portion to study and make yourself prepare for the test, okay, for the exam. Okay, so today I will discuss about the theory of voluntarism, which you basically know, which I have already discussed about certain theories of voluntarism, as well as the role of NGOs in UN, United Nations Organization. So when I say NGOs in UN, so what usually comes and how NGOs are defined in United Nations, which is important, the definition of NGOs, and the very important section in the Charter, and that is 71 article, which has defined the consultative status of NGOs. So basically these 2-3 things are quite important, 2-3 aspects of NGOs, which will highlight the definition of NGOs in United Nations. And in United Nations Charter, the NGOs are defined as a group which is run by people and which is driven by some common interest. Yeah. Is everything fine? Yes, it is okay. Which is driven by some common interest and which will also facilitate, citizen connection with government and also encourage people's participation in various tasks. So the definition which NGO Charter entail, UN Charter entail regarding this NGO is that it actually task driven. NGOs are organizations which are task driven. So task is one word which got emphasized when we actually get to find definition of NGOs in UN. So here I am discussing about NGO and UN. I have already put a lot of deliberation on this matter in the very first class, if you remember, but Hemasri told that something I might have missed out, so it's better again to reiterate whatever I have discussed. Okay, so first thing is the definition, second is the status, consultative status, which NGOs have received as a part of international organizations. So how NGOs are perceived by international organizations like UNO. So NGOs are perceived as a consultative organizations, and accordingly consultative status is bestowed to NGOs by Article 71. Article 71 of UN Charter. So here it is also mentioned that there are certain NGOs which usually work on all the issues mentioned in the United Nations Charters, and those NGOs are categorized as general interest NGOs. Okay, and there are certain NGOs who are working on some, very special areas, and they have got special consultative status. And there are also certain NGOs which are occasionally very active on certain areas, which got a mention in the International Charter, which actually forms the agenda of development, and they got the roster status. So there are 3 kinds of NGOs when we review the whole process of consultative status, because ECOSOC, that is another organ of United Nations Organization, that is Economic and Social Council, they usually review the consultative status and has been trying to streamline the process of that consultative status. No? So while trying to streamline the process of consultative status, they have made it standardized, and also it made certain parameters based on which they will give that means EcoShop will give the general interest status, then roster status, and special interest status. So certain NGOs which fulfill all the parameters of those agendas, means working on all those areas which are mentioned in this international status, will get general status, and those NGOs which are working on certain specific areas, here it happens to be one specific areas, then you see environment happens to be one specific areas, or even you see IPSA, that is International Political Science Association, is also international NGOs. Okay. International NGO working on the development of political agenda across the world, and it also facilitated that dialogue and discussions among the polity and the stating international organization. Okay, so the NGOs also facilitate agreement between the state on public policy matters. So when we are talking about the role of NGOs in UN, these NGOs actually works as a facilitators of various agreements which are carried out between the states, member states of the UN on various policy matters. Okay, and there are also certain NGOs, as I have told you, there are certain NGOs who work occasionally on certain aspects and areas mentioned in the international status, and they got this roster status. Okay, so you see that's how we have a division of NGOs, and we see that all the specialized agencies, when you are talking about WTO, you talk about you see ILO, International Labour Organization, right? Then World Health Organizations, ITU, International Telecommunication Union, then UNESCO, UNICEF. These are specialized agencies. These are equivalent to international intergovernmental organizations, and they always work in consultation with certain NGOs. So hence we see, as they work in consultation with NGOs, hence these NGOs have acquired a consultative status, and most of the time they are also termed as an NGOs. But to be more specific, we see that there are NGOs, Greenpeace, Amnesty International, Planned Parenthood. They do have some specialized functions. They have acquired that specialized status among these consultative categories. As I have told you, that first all the NGOs which are being listed, they have acquired consultative status, and acquiring this consultative status is also involves a procedure. So it is not that it's an every NGOs will acquire that consultative status, and you see ECOSOC has already streamlined that process of acquiring that consultative status. So based on their interest, based on their area of activities, and their agendas which has a similarity with international agendas. So based on that, NGOs can apply and they will get that status. And they can also provide like various kind of advisory services to IGOs. Okay, and we see that apart from this status, we have those NGOs like Greenpeace, which are working on environment, Amnesty International working on human rights. Then we have that Planned Parenthood working on reproductive health services. Okay, so and IPSA, that is also another NGO working on that development of dialogue and discussion on political communication. Basically, that is the International Political Science Association. These are certain NGOs These are not specialized agency. But the specialized agency like WHO, ITUs, etc., that ITU, then like UNESCO, these are called IGOs, intergovernmental organizations, not necessarily NGOs. Okay, so there is a consultative status between IGOs and NGOs. Now you see there is another organization that is called DIP, that is Department of Public Information. So this Department of Public Information is the executive body which will function various activities regarding this organization of seminar, then organization of conferences and international forum, okay, granting pass to NGOs, and there is also a very, you see, a communication that streamline between this NGO, Department of Public Information, and NGOs. And how this communication has been streamlined is that this Department of Public Information most of the time provide the grants, grants like pass basically. They granting the pass to the NGOs to access to all the library resources like access to photo, film and other documents, and the granting access to other resources also, resources like any documents and the minutes of consultations or intergovernmental, you see, any intergovernmental meeting and discussion has happened. Okay, so that granting access to resources is one function which the DPI, Department of Public Information, usually carries out, and they also organize various international forums. They are bringing together all the officials of specialized agencies, as well as, you see, members of the member state, like member state of United Nations organization, like member state, there are how many member states? More than 160, 170 member states are there. So bringing them together, and also officials and representatives from other NGOs, and try to create a dialogue between them and help NGOs also to that facilitate their consultative status. So in that way we could actually get to see that relationship between like DPI and NGOs. So doesn't have that much to speak on the role of NGOs in UN, but yeah, UN has already recognized the role of NGO as a task-driven group. That is a task-driven group. There are certain tasks which are supposed to be performed by those NGOs, and also they do have headquarters at different, like, part of this world, and they do have branches spread across the world through which they carry out various activities which are mentioned in this charter, United Nations charters, and they acquired that consultative status by this Article 71 of the charters, and this consultative status, this acquisition of that status is facilitated by ECOSOC. Okay, ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, which is one organ of United Nations organization. Okay, and apart from this, okay, this is basically about UN and NGOs. Then we have this theories of voluntarism. Regarding theories of voluntarism, I will say in one class we will discuss about the theories of voluntarism. So there are certain theories. These are based on the voluntary action has been carried out by the NGOs, and based on their strategies, based on their vision, based on their attitude towards voluntary actions. So when we discuss about the theories, so we need to find the attitude of those voluntary groups, or you see NGOs, while carrying out these services. So first is the sacrificial volunteerism, which I have discussed, I guess. Briefly, I have discussed about those theories, if you remember. One is sacrificial volunteerism. Second one is you have this professional volunteerism. I'll come and discuss detail about this professional volunteerism. Then you have that thing called opulent volunteerism. Okay, and or ventilatory volunteerism. Then you also have that amateur volunteerism. You have survival volunteerism, and then you have pseudo volunteerism. Okay, so first is the sacrificial volunteerism, which usually gets reflected in the spirit of Gandhi, in the spirit of Ambedkar, and those public spirited leaders who are born leaders who sacrifice their life for the community welfare. So we do not need any kind of theories to define their work, because their work has, evolved out, helped to evolve out certain theories. And at the same time, we see that they are born leader, and also they are born volunteers. And hardly one person constitute this sacrificial volunteerism. So when we say sacrificial volunteerism, they have that intent to sacrifice themselves for the cause of these people, right? And it's not that they do not have a mission, an objective. They have a vision, and they do everything to fulfill their vision. Okay, so that is what the sacrificial volunteerism. They do everything to fulfill their vision. They do everything to, to fulfill the cause of the society. So that is the intent of Mother Teresa. You see that Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar. So those are volunteers of the society. So based on whom we have some ideas, like ideologies developed, Gandhian ideologies. We also have Jai Bhim, that is also Ambedkar ideology is there, right? Then we have an ideology of peace also surround Mother Teresa, right? And we have an ideology of, not ideology, that missionary sentiment, missionary spirit we usually discuss in welfare services, right? Because when we see that Friends in Need happens to be the first society established in Madras in 1858, carry out the voluntary activities in India. If we trace the root of volunteerism, okay, and thereafter we actually see this the activities of Christian missionaries and social reformers in carrying out voluntary activities. But to discuss about the work of Christian missionaries and social reformer in India will not fall in, if we discuss their work, each and everyone will not fall in sacrificial volunteerism. Okay, so there are some people who are categorized as sacrificial volunteerism. Okay, so because there are also people like you have that co-founders of Brahma Samaj. Okay, then we have Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Not each and everyone is attuned to the concept sacrificial volunteerism. Okay, so so when we discuss about some ideology, so we actually relate it more with that sacrificial volunteerism. Only 1% are there. So, but there are certain people also. I meet a person, Ajay. His name was Ajay Sahu or Sahai. Ajay Sahai. He is too much into the sacrificial volunteerism. I have actually seen that he devoted himself for the development of rural community, and inspired by Gandhian philosophy also. He worked in those Naxal villages. Okay, then he
so even right now there is Varabara Rao. He's still in this Varabara Rao.
Okay, yeah. So there are even interest of Medha Patkar. Medha Patkar is also, we can relate her to sacrificial volunteerism, because that 22 days fast is not cup of tea for everyone. So then we see second one is professional volunteerism. So how we distinguish sacrificial volunteerism and professional volunteerism? In professional volunteerism, you usually learn certain principles, code of conduct, and theories of volunteerism, and certain approaches. So you actually learn those approaches and then you go to the field and you work in the field. So you have some mission, strategies and visions, and you try to fulfill those strategies with those acquired and learned approaches. And this section, professional volunteers, constitute 10 to 15%, you see, 10 to 15% of volunteers, total volunteers. So very less number. If you see, the sacrificial volunteers constitute 1% of total volunteers, and professional volunteers constitute only 10% to 15% of total volunteers. And they have a mission, they have a principle, they have approaches, but you see, and they are quite leadership oriented, in the sense that most of these professional volunteers, they can be categorized into traditional leaders or charismatic leaders. And the traditional leaders, it is based on that seniority, and charismatic leaders is based on sincerity. And you see the second category of leaders at times, this is quite observable, that they usually get frustrated out of the research scenario of development, and even if they have acquired all this professionalism, and they usually leave many NGOs and they go out and open their own NGOs and do their business. So you see, and they come under this professional volunteerism. Then we have another category of volunteerism that is called amateur volunteerism. Amateur volunteerism, they constitute more than 25 to 30% volunteers. So amateur volunteerism. So now you see this, most of the volunteers are amateur volunteerism. So they think that it is quite easy to run a development organizations. You don't need to learn any philosophy, don't need to learn any principles or even any approaches to development. So it is easy to be aggressive imitators rather than unique originators. So they consider those who are professionals as very unique, and even if they originate certain ideas, so it's better to imitate them, aggressively imitate them, and you survive in that flow. But yeah, they do have that concept that they want to bring change in the society. You go and ask some you ask some social workers who are not trained, but they have been in the field associated with developmental work for even more than 10 years, 15 years. Okay, but they did not have any kind of training. They did not even feel to have that training. They said that out of my zeal, out of enthusiasm, I have joined. Okay, I want to do something different. I want to bring change or social transformation. Okay, so they have got two intent. It is not like that whatever I have provided regarding their characters or the way I have defined, not necessarily they will be ending them up themselves to be like that. No, but the thing is that they have that zeal and enthusiasm to do something different for the community, to do something different for the society. So with that zeal, you ask them, okay, I want to do something different. I want to bring these transformations. I want to contribute to the society. But because of this resource constraint or because of different kind of financial constraint, everything comes under resource constraint. They could not get the training and all. Okay, but because of their spirit, they join this field, and they have been working and surviving. Okay, these amateur volunteerism, not necessarily they do have a vision. So most of the time, so they are not clear about the visions, and that's how they can be differentiated from professional volunteerism. Even sacrificial volunteerism always work with that vision. They will do everything. They will even they will they impact their life to fulfill their vision. Okay. And professional volunteerism have a vision, but the vision is not executable most of the time. So they will work on certain principles and objectives. Okay, so because objectives are easy to be achieved. Okay, so they will have certain mission, but actually, although they have a vision which is Latin, but normally they don't speak about the vision. They simply say, yeah, we have some target, we have that mission, so we achieve that. Yeah. So these are professional volunteerism, and amateur do not have a vision basically, because they do have that zeal to bring change and doing something different. Bringing change, doing something different, that's how people actually, but you see, if they are trained, they can turn professional as well as sacrificial volunteerism. Now that is the thing that this segment constitute 25 to 30% if they are being trained properly. Okay, if we can amuse them, give them training, and provide some capacity, building avenues, so definitely they can turn to professional volunteerism and sacrificial volunteerism. So that is one thing. Oh, sorry. And then we have this after amateur, we have this called ventilatory volunteerism, or this is opulent volunteerism, which is a ventilatory. One is called ventilatory volunteerism. Ventilatory volunteerism means they join in voluntary activities after ventilate their urban space, So just because you want to ventilate their space, basically this space are urban space only, and they find themselves in the field of volunteerism. So they are affluent people, they are elite people, okay, because they have their own business, they are running their business. But to ventilate their stress level, they just want to come and visit a camp in the village. They organize the camp in the village. They distribute some materials in the village. They contribute in relief and also in charity activities. Many NGOs, they can also open their own organization like Lions Craft, Rotary Craft. So you see that comes under this ventilatory volunteerism, because you see how they are different from this three group is that they are resource rich. Amateur will definitely they have that zeal and enthusiasm, but not necessarily that they are resource rich. Okay, so ventilatory volunteers are resource rich. So they are rich in resource, they have the resources, they want to bring, it is not like they want to bring change. They just want to elevate their stress level. Okay, so but that's why we see that whenever there is some kind of frustrations or we see any kind of inconsistencies happen in the field, they will quickly withdraw. So they will go with that shield and they will also quickly withdraw whenever they find some pressure. So that volunteerism itself is not consistent. Okay, so it is the most inconsistent volunteerism. Although we see now when you are talking about contracting out of service. Sorry? What? So it is most inconsistent volunteerism, because we are now talking about that services, there is contracting out of various services, right? So contracting out of services in the sense when government contract an NGO to carry out services on behalf of this government or NGOs or in private bodies. And also we have the contracting in any person government can hire in to carry out certain services. Then we have the subsidiary. Subsidiary happens to be another scheme of contract to subsidies and rental and lease, right? So subsidies and rental and lease subsidies, government can provide some kind of subsidies, like they can provide a building, or they can provide some amenities to promote certain services, and rental, they also give a school building or even this public health center to any organization, to NGOs, to promote their, to carry out their service. So you see, in that case, when we look at the So they are the one which can attract government more towards contracting out the services and getting the subsidies, okay, or getting contract from the government. But at the same time, just because the service is not consistent, that happens to be one challenge in terms of this kind of volunteerism. But it also comprises more than 25% of volunteers, vaccinatory volunteerism, and in industries. There's elitist kind of volunteerism which is there. Even we also put CSR in this practices, because CSR approach is also not consistent. Okay, so when we say CSR, in the last class we discussed about CSR, so it is not a consistent approach. So it is an obligatory just to make the image of the organization positive in front of this public. And then we have ventilatory. After ventilatory, we have another one. We have also survival. Survival volunteerism. When is the survival volunteerism? Survival volunteerism. Survival volunteerism are those who basically they are into this business as a to earn rate. Okay, so they are donor driven, no doubt. So whenever they don't get money and they could not attract donor, so they really leave this whole sector and voluntary sectors, and they do not have any information, they do not know this objectives and principles and the philosophy. They are not even trained. Most of the time they are not even trained. So they are not that spirited. It is they are not at all spirited. They are not at all spirited, unlike this amateur. Amateur are very, very spirited to bring some change. But this survival volunteers are not at all spirited to bring some change. So, is it fine? You want to hand it over to someone else?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So, it is what? Survival volunteerism, and then we have another volunteerism, pseudo volunteerism.
Ma'am, how much do they constitute of survival volunteers?
Survival volunteerism, yeah, it's another 20 to 25%. You see, survival volunteerism is there, and now you say it has increased even to more than 25%. You actually see 35% if we actually combine.
So survival volunteerism is a bit similar to amateur volunteerism, right? When it comes to the people involved.
People involved, but people who are not trained, who do
Yeah.
not have that philosophy, who do not know any principle
Yeah.
of development, who do not know any practices of development. But at the same time, amateur volunteers have that.
Yeah, that's
Okay, have that spirit to bring change in the society. But survival volunteerism doesn't have that change, have that spirit. The only you see, the ideology they believe is to earn money. Okay, earn money and earn rate. This is also a kind of shortcut. And it is related to pseudo volunteerism also. So at times you see, when they started believing earning money by hook and crook. So many NGOs, you earn money by hook and crook. You find the donors, you earn money by hook and crook. And this is now quite prominent practices because of the kind of pressure that government is also having under this neoliberalism, because now government is quite pro towards contracting out services to NGO. And you see most of those people who are even unemployed and who are expelled from NGOs and who are, who are ex-officials, they usually run some organization, they form some organization, they run and they carry out those projects. And after carrying out those projects, you also don't see their, their existence. So simply, to run some projects and to get that document funds, they have a sudden you say that sudden appearance, and then suddenly they disappear also. So their motto is to earn money by hook and crook. So and these survival and pseudo volunteers are similar, because at times survival volunteers turn to pseudo volunteers also. But that survival instinct, if survival instinct is there, no, then you cannot make them turn to sacrifice and professionalism. If you are only in this work only to like unbreed, if you are into this field of like volunteerism to earn bread and butter, then I don't think that you can elevate your standard to professional and sacrificial volunteerism. Okay, so you can even denigrate to even you say pseudo volunteerism. And because of this, you say inactivities or insensitivities of most of the NGOs, the whole NGO sectors have earned a very bad name. And hence, government intervention is also required in order to identify those NGOs which have given a very bad name to whole NGO sectors and the name of pseudo volunteerism, and identify and scrap those NGOs out. But this is not happening. Rather, there are more NGOs coming out to take advantage of government projects. And government also did not take any stringent measure, have not been taken into stringent measure to identify those NGOs. Rather, to facilitate those NGOs, okay? For a certain period of time, we will also get money, and certain youth will be unemployed youth will be benefited that way. So you can go and run a kind of voluntary sectors. So that becomes a kind of, you see, that motto's intent. So not right kind of voluntarism at all. Okay, so these are the stories of voluntarism, which is important. And apart from what we have discussed regarding the consultative status, roster status, and even general status of NGOs. And then I will discuss very briefly about this participatory tools. Namaste once asked me about this participatory tools, and whosoever has involved in carrying out this participatory PRA in village, one is Chandan, and you were not involved, then Chandan and Chandika. Both of them were involved, right? Okay. So you do not know about participatory tools.
Yeah, we have learned.
Huh? You also visited?
No, ma'am, we have seen their.
Okay, the photographs you have seen, right? Okay, so when we are talking about this PRA tools, so as I have told you PRA, and you already know about the difference between PRA and RRA, so I will not go detail about this RRA and PRA, you know. So PRA, which happens to be a lot of approaches and methods in contemporary times in order to carry out developmental tasks. Okay. So in PRA participatory rural appraisals, we also have number of tools which will facilitate participation of the rural people. Now, when you are talking about this participations, you also need to know the definition of participation first. And participation at different levels, when we discuss about the tools of the PRA, at different levels, there are certain type of participations. And you can convert anti-participation and zero participation to even full participation and autonomous group. So how can you convert anti-participation, zero participation to an autonomous, to acquire an autonomous status is very important, and this will happen through PRA. Okay, so first you actually see when you have different layers of participation and levels of participation, you actually enter into a community, you make a transit block, you enter into a community to go and you check out resources, to find out the resources available. Then you see that often you find that there is anti-participation. Anti-participation is there when people don't want to participate. That is there, I guess, in the lecture which I have provided. If you go through the lectures, and if you say that Garthos, they will find that I cannot listen. So that is what anti-participation approach is there, that people you are forcefully making people participate, that is anti-participations. And which, this is the mistake, and you see developmental tragedy, most of the NGOs are also doing anti-participations, and this is done by basically the pseudo and survival NGOs, you know. So professional NGOs will not carry out any anti-participation, but they are forcefully involving people. So hence, when you are talking about executing the PRA, you cannot simply go and you bring people and tell them, okay, you draw a social map, you draw a Venn diagram, or make a visual representation of the village. You cannot simply say. Okay. So what you need to do is to study the village first. So for PRA also, what it involves is first the basic assessment of the village, assessment of the community. You know the history, geography, demography. You know the problem of the villages, various developmental needs in the villages, the preferences of the villagers, and health status, education status, economic status. You study. You make a general assessment of the community. So before you execute the PRA, the kind of tasks which you need to carry out, and these very tasks are also, you see, this is also applicable to organization of community. When you are talking about community organization, because this is also one task of participation. Okay, so when you are talking about organization of this community or community organization, it is also method of development, right? Community organization is a method of development. Okay, when you are talking about community development, is a process. It is a process, a continuous process. So community organization is a method through which you can implement development. So that is what in community organization also, and in PRA as well as. So first is the assessment of this community, which is quite important. You actually carry out this assessment of the community, right? And secondly, after assessing the community, you form a functional team. You form a functional team.
Ma'am, you wrote communication organization.
Oh, sorry. Community. Okay. Community organization. Okay. Thank you. Okay. This assessment of community. Then functional team you will carry out. You will form. And functional team is basically the team which will be quite passionate to carry out various activities. And it is on you to find out that functional team. You go roam around the villages, you go and discuss to the village head as well as find out the people from different clusters and different strata, and find out their level of dedications and commitment and their passion, and then you form a functional team with that community. So this is a functional team, and then you carry out this and decide this development plan and development action. Development plan and development action. Now this will come in third step. So you decide the development plan and development actions. So development plan is not that easy to decide the development plan which will be based on their needs. So because after you decide the plan of what is to be carried out, you also you need to get consent from each and every strata of the people. Once you come into a consensus, then you will go for implementations of the plan. And finally, you will evaluate it. Right, implementation, and finally you will evaluate. Evaluation. Right? So here you see when all these stages involved in community organization, organizing communities. Similarly, this also involves in PRA. So PRA, when you say PRA, in order to convert anti-participation to, you see, autonomous group. When you say autonomous group, in self-sufficient group, community organization, this is the highest level of participation. First, anti-participation means you boost participation. Then you have zero participation. people won't participate, zero participation, or you say passively you are announcing some programs also. This is also kind of participation, you see. But zero participation is different from passive participation, because when you see passive participation, basically you are announcing, as an NGO you are announcing some schemes, governmental schemes to the community. Okay, and they are listening to the scheme, they are also being aware about the schemes. That is called passive participation, because they are being informed, no? But they are not sharing any information. Okay, so it is not equivalent to information sharing, but okay, it is equivalent to passive participation. Okay, and then we see, and then we have another layer after passive participation. You want to receive the call?
No, it's fine. Okay, it's not that.
Okay.
Unknown number.
Okay.
I'll just put on some.
After basic participation, you have this information sharing. So there you actually make villagers take part in your questionnaire. So you design a questionnaire or interview schedule and make village take part in that questionnaire and interview schedule, which is basically related to problem, effects and impact of development. So different problems of development which you get to know with the help of designing an interview schedule or questionnaire. Impact of developmental schemes which are already being taken out, carried out, and effects of development. Okay, so similar. So the impact will be too deep when you study the impact analysis. So effects will be related to cause and effects. So you also need to have some statistical analysis for that. So that is important. Okay, that is important in the very initial stages. And you see there are also different types of participation. After information sharing, okay, so information sharing, you also have what kind of participation? Consultation. Like consultation, many even NGOs, they usually consult these village heads or clusters in the villages on any occasions. So you consult. So consult on any developmental plan. So in the third stage also, when you discuss the planning of developmental action plan, so you actually consult. So then also you share some information and you participate. Right. And you also have participation like contributing, labor contributions. So it is a different kind of participation altogether. You contribute labor or you contribute capital in constructing a road in the villages. So this is also a question. When you are contributing labor, how can you be how can you townly participate in development? Because you will not get any kind of reward. But to make people own the project, make people own the development, it is quite important to make them participate in this process. Like you participate, let them participate in the construction of the road, construction of the center. So sometimes if they have resources, if you think that they can contribute resources, so let them contribute resources. So this is also a question that most of the time NGOs, they got lakhs of rupees to carry out the project. So in the name of participation, they make villagers participate. Okay. And is it that somehow half of their cost has been relieved? So that happens to be one question regarding this labor contribution, but this is also material contribution, labor contribution, one kind of participation we will have. And then we also have that self, you see, this is called this at last this is self-reliance, which is related to autonomy. So and participation related to external intervention, that is also external intervention, some kind of participation happen at times, externally induced participations. And when they started defining and designing their own program, plan, actions, that is the ultimate autonomy they will usually gain. And there are also topical PRA. You know, when you're talking about the nature of PRA, there are topical PRA, exploratory PRA. You know, so topical and exploratory PRA, and there is another PRA, training and research PRA. Training and research PRA is the kind of PRA I'm discussing with you, because I'm discussing this PRA with you in order to make you trained regarding the tools which you can further use in the community. Okay, this is basically a training and research PRA tools. Okay, and the topical PRA is basically you identify one problem and then you carry out some PRA tools. Identify one problem, because PRA can be carried out on variety of occasions. You want simply to know the village. Okay, you know the resources, available natural resources in the village. You can carry out a PRA. You want to know the health status in that village. You can carry out a PRA. You want to know the economic status in that village. You can carry out a PRA. So how you can carry out a PRA, I will let you know. So there are also different parameters involved, and then you see that suppose you want to know the change or the trend, changing trend in the village, changing rituals in the village. Then also you can carry out a PRA, and that is basically exploratory PRA. You know, because it involves the changing trend in that village. Okay, so that is exploratory PRA, which can also be carried out. Now, the most important, you see, tools, when we say, apart from those tools which we know, introducible, we know, right, then we say case studies, we know, right, and we know about this timeline, we know about this transect walk, then focus group discussion, something focus group discussion which you have already carried out, I guess. So you arrange some of those opinion leaders, so you actually bring them together and you ask some questions, and not asking questions, you give them some topic which is relevant to the problem you define, and they will discuss on that issue. Right? So it is very you see, very common tool. And transect walk, that itself is a kind of participatory tool. You also have developing a timeline at different period of time. So the kind of development carried out in that villages. So based on the year, and this timeline is equivalent to seasonal calendar also. But in seasonal calendar, which is one tool, we will go more detail. Okay, so in seasonal calendar, we will go more detail to know the rainfall precipitation in the village. You see, in even in 1 month, then you day-wise you see a rainfall precipitation, or in a year, then month-wise rainfall precipitation in that village, or you see this cropping pattern, or you see this crop grows in the village at a different period of time, and also over the years. So you need to define a particular time period. So in timeline, basically you can develop a timeline, weekly timeline, you can have monthly timeline, like that way you can develop. And you can, and weekly and monthly timeline, suppose timeline like weekly timeline, like day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that way, then you can put the statistics, or you say rainfall pattern, you simply put this rainfall precipitations, then you see crop related, and you see not even crop food, or even milk aid from the livestock. Then you see other elements. Like that practice, you can simply on day 1 rainfall precipitation 20%, 30%, like that way you can carry out. And then milk it on livestock, like on the first day you see this household, like all the household produce more than how many liters. So in that village. you see more than 100 liters milk. Then you see on the second day there is also liters, 60 liters, like that way you can develop a timeline. So timeline is different from seasonal calendar, because in seasonal calendar we usually go by detailed analysis of the event, or you see we are talking about the seasonal calendar. So this is the seasonal calendar. So first might be see this. So like that way you can actually put that January, March, that April, May, like that way. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Okay, for 5 months seasonal calendar you can go. Okay, and then here you can actually put the heat problem. So in January, I have heat problem, you see. Sorry? It's a like 5 months seasonal calendar.
No, you wrote years, so that got.
Oh, sorry. That is years and months. Years and months. Okay.
Okay.
So then you have this heat problem. Then you see this crop grow, and also construction activities in the village. Okay, next, and you see this rainfall in that period. Heat problem or heat status, and you see you see that or you can have an literacy index also. Okay, so health problem, health status, suppose in January you could actually see there is no immunization in the health status. Immunization in January, then there is no immunization again, then again May there is an immunization. Health problem, you see there are problems like reproductive health problem are there, and then you have a problem related to, in January there are certain problems. You see this cholera or diarrhea related disease, that diarrhea related disease have come. Then you see this typhoid came up and it continued, that disease continued. Okay, like that way it continued. Then April, there is a stable condition in April. So in stable condition, okay, like that way you can indicate. Then crop grows, you see that in the month of January, okay, you have crop harming. So 90%, then 80%, then you see that, then 60 or 70%. And it is reduced like that way. And various construction activities which have been carrying out, like that way you can have precipitations. And other activities you can, so it is based on the kind of objectives you will decide. Suppose regarding this health status, kind of health problem or diseases which are available in that villages. It's a kind of diseases. So what may be like, if there's referral or kind of services which are available in the villages. So that that can also be mentioned in this regional calendar. Kind of services like referral services available or not. Okay, referral services related to that very high intensity pregnancy cases or any kind of, you see, and antenatal services are available or not, or childhood healthcare services are provided or not. Okay, apart from immunization programs. So you can mention in that regional calendar. Okay, so that is one calendar where you can, in seasonal calendar, you can mention in detail about different services, and also you can have a matrix ranking. Which in matrix ranking also, what you can do, you can have a detailed ranking of tabular representation of various issues. Like you say that regarding the crop growth or crop pattern, so you can have tabular representations, and regarding this health, like status, you can have tabular representations. And also you see this livestock available, their price, that milk aid, their disease resistance capacity. So you can have a tabular representations of that. So suppose you want to help that community, so like who are into this animal husbandry. So you can have a tabular representation of matrix again in terms of this. The kind of cattle and you see there's a number of cows, horses are there, and then you see goats, pigs are there, suppose in that villages, like that way. Come in. Yeah, come. Number of pigs. Okay. So poultry. Okay. And then what you can put? Price you can put. Okay. You can put the price. You can put the required fodder requirement. You can put whether any help or assistance you got or not. Matrix ranking. So any help or assistance or disease resistance, and then you can find so serve for food, and this milk aid, like that. And what you can do, and then you can count some points. Now in matrix ranking, what you can do, you can tell villagers to put some stone, or you see put some, not only stones, but any kind of materials to give a rank to this animal, suppose. Okay, so you can actually see the tabular representations of the livestocks available in the village. Then you decide the price. You tell them to give numbers to price, which will be the higher price, which will be of low price. Okay. Then fodder requirement, like a cow will require more fodder, I guess. So you tell them as per their choice, as per their idea, how much fodder requirement to serve this animal. So that's what help and assistance, what kind of help they derive from keeping this livestock, so that you can have separating ducks. Okay, so that you take them to you give rent accordingly. They can put 2-3 stones. If they want to give higher rank, they can give 4 stones. If they want to give lower rank, they can give 2 stones like that, or 1 stone like that. This is resistance capacity. of those elements. And then when they serve for food, certain elements also serve for food of the villages. So that is milk, how much milk is yield. So that will also comprise, suppose a cow, more milk will come from cows like that way. And also you can have a separate matrix on cows, ordinary cows, jersey cows, desi cows like that way. Okay, so in that way also it will be helpful. Accordingly, different kind of health diseases available, supposing TB. Okay, and the kind of services which are available, health ranking. You can have a health matrix ranking. You see, you can actually put the health, different kind of health diseases, like you see the diarrhea, and then typhoid, then you have this highest reproductive health problem, and then you see you have problems related to childhood problems, childhood diseases. Okay, so these are the diseases, and now kind of services. Reference services available in the villages or not. Will and which will put childhood care services or not. Then antenatal care services. Because this is not required. This is like PHC available or not. When you see public health unit is available or not. Okay. Number of foods like that way reference services available for suppose for typhoid or some services. Immunization is available or not. Like that way you can create a matrix. Okay, immunization. Okay, for this immunization program is there, typhoid is there, then for reproductive diseases no need, since childhood diseases for certain like immunization program is already available like that way. Then you say childhood care, okay, for diarrhea and you see typhoid, there are childhood care services which are available, and there is separate service, there are reference services available for certain kind of, or no reference services available for any kind of diseases like that. PHC is available, okay, and in PHC the kind of services available. So in that way also you can have a matrix ranking. Okay, on health matrix. So health status, if you want to know the health status of the community. Okay, so this is a tabular representations of an issue which can be carried out through PI. And then we have seasonal calendar, we have discussed, matrix ranking, we have discussed, social mapping, which already Chandan and Shanika has carried out. Social mapping is basically comes under, you see, mapping. When you say mapping, what you can map? You can map the resources, natural resources, basically. You can map the society, okay, social structure of the villages. You can also map infrastructures, yeah, village infrastructures, yeah. You can natural resources, infrastructures, then even the economic status also you can map. Household structure you can map.
With the population.
Huh? And diet consumption and all. That is also diet consumption which can come under the seasonal calendar. Also diet and consumption. So then how much food you consume. So that comes under seasonal calendar. Okay. So that will not come under mapping. So basically when you are talking about the mapping, it will give you an avenue to have optimal utilization of the resources. So in social mapping, what you usually do? Suppose you basically prefer premise of, you see this panchayat office and premise of schools, like that certain premises you will prefer. and prefer the local materials like rangoli and atta and moida, whatever available. Okay, that you will prefer, and to let villagers mobilize and work on social mapping. In social mapping, so what you basically do, first you have to decide here about this household. Suppose there are like that, there are suppose Kacha household. Okay, this is like Manhat. Okay, then this will be like a Manhat. Then this is a big heart. Okay, so this will be like a big heart. Okay, this available. Then this is a constructed road, Pakka road, and this is a mud road. Mud road, like that way. Okay, so first you need to put this is like a mud hut, big hut in the villages, Pakka road. This is also it's Pakka road, and this is Kacha road. Then when you see this, some households having shop in heart. Oh, sorry, this is in heart or here. And also there will be in heart. Missing heart. Obviously, this is okay. This is a household of Hindu religion, Christian household. Like that, your religion, there's a Muslim household like that way. Then you have this household with health problem. Household health problem. Okay. And that way, then also you see that a household, these are literate household. Literate household. Okay, like that way. Now you will decide that first you will decide the road. Suppose this is the road, and there are also Kacha road, You must draw the road in the villages. You make them. Okay? Like that way. Make them. Draw the roads. Okay? This is the Pakka road, Kacha road. Okay? Like that way. Then you put this mud hut wherever it's supposed it's a mud hut. Okay. Like you can make some plaster, make them with some plaster. So this is a very exciting experience, So you would actually love to do this because you let them do areas like that way. So there also you after Mathas you also have the some big hut. So like that way draw. Okay. Then Sopsin hut, some like that way you find Mason hut you will find in this. So you need to fill all these sections. Okay? All these sections based on this criteria you will fill. This is a social mapping, right? You are doing this, Chandan?
Yeah, photograph.
No photograph. Did I miss something?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What is that photograph?
This map.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I did not miss anything, no?
No.
Okay, it's fine then. Good. This is something I did not even learn. I later have come. Because I did on this, no? Because I basically belong to this communication field. I've learned something different in institutions. But most of the time I end up teaching something and this is okay, then we have resource mapping. It's very exciting experiment. So I think I will get this out. Yeah. Then we have resource. Last one. This is the last one. Okay. We are almost finished because this class has been continued to its.
I'm 1.5 hour.
I'll finish it. You can leave. Okay, you can go to the washroom because I'll finish. This is the last one.
Okay.
Resource mapping. Okay. Resource mapping. In resource mapping. So basically, in resource mapping, here again, it is also exciting. You see? So this is what, as I have already told, in participatory learning, what is important is this is what you acquire in participatory exercise, participatory doing uprising, is that offset learning. So offset learning or is a reverse learning. Offset learning is something that most of the time you need to keep yourself mum and to facilitate facilitate the villagers to work on this matter. Reverse learning is that you actually learn from the villagers, and also there is a thing called let them do. So basically you simply watch and observe, you don't do anything. So in the resource mapping, what you have is that like you say, community forest. Community forest. So you see that there is community forest. Then there are some hills available, rivers, and this rivulets, like that. And then you take out this berry field, sesame field, and other seeds happen, any work. And then you see there are also numbers of so berry fields are like berry fields. Then you see number of
Well.
And then the houses also. You can mention about the house. Houses. And then you can mention about the panchayat office and all in resource mapping. Okay. So based on that, what you can actually see, there might be these there. So you can actually make this direction first, north, south, east, west, and divide that. Then hills. Then you see this rivers like that way. There are also rivulet. And then you see this hierarchies, then you have that community foresting, the paddy fields. Like that way. And you can see this. This is it here. Okay. Something. It is, but you like it. Once you will do, you will like it. So this is all about what we get to know about PRI. So I will not extend the lectures. So as I have already recorded the lectures, you can get to find whatever is being recorded. I will not extend. And if you want me to come tomorrow, I will come. And if you say that no, you will study tomorrow, then we will study. We'll study. Okay. Okay, you study. I will provide you some material also.
Can you suggest some important topics or questions?
So, the syllabus is very concrete. So, it will not be any, you will not face any difficulty regarding the questions. First, you prepare for the plan objective and planning objective, vision, mission, then evaluation, monitoring. Some PPTs I have shared with you, PPT lecture videos. So that is important assignment for the exam. And then institutionalization of and also regarding this formation of SHG and all base level organizations. Okay. Then whatever today I have discussed about PRA and all. So one or two questions on PRA.
And ma'am, theories of NGO.
Theories of volunteerism.
Volunteerism.
We discuss about theories of volunteerism today. So that will comprise another question. And then history of NGOs, which I have discussed in the very first class. History of NGOs. History of NGO and community organization. In the very first class I have discussed, and I will distribute some materials if you want. And I have discussed about different approaches of NGOs, like locality development approach, then you have that social planning and social action. Those approaches are quite important approach. So we did not have a recorded video lectures at that point of time. I did not record the lectures, but do not have that much of materials also, because it is available somewhere in bits and pieces. But I think there is a book I might have, so I can share that with you. So, about these approaches of NGOs, then development, CSR. So I discuss about CSR. I will share some materials also. CSR approach of NGOs. Okay. Then model of development. Okay, which I have discussed, and then approaches. Approaches I have already told you. These are